My name is Margaret Lewis. I'm 76 years old. I've lived long enough to know the difference between being quiet and being invisible. And for years, my son's wife pretended I was the latter. Her name is Vanessa, and from the very first time I met her, she studied me like a piece of unwanted furniture, something her husband had brought into the home that she didn't ask for, didn't choose, and didn't want to maintain. They had just gotten married, a rushed courthouse ceremony in Philadelphia that I wasn't invited to, only informed of after the fact. My son, David, had once been the kind of boy who'd bring me breakfast in bed on my birthday, who'd run back into the house if he forgot to hug me goodbye, who never missed a Sunday queen. But once Vanessa came along, I could feel him folding into her shadow. When they finally came to visit, months later, I knew within minutes where I stood. Not once during that visit did Vanessa call me Mum, not Mrs. Lewis, not even Margaret. She simply avoided using my name altogether, like a ghost you don't want to anger by acknowledging. At the dinner table, I served her chicken and mashed potatoes. She didn't say thank you. When I complimented her blouse, she looked at David and changed the subject. When I asked about her work, she was a corporate attorney, answered in one-word replies, scrolling her phone under the table. I tried not to take it personally, but over time, I realized it wasn't me. It was what I represented. The old life, the roots, the past she didn't want to carry forward. They lived in Philadelphia. I stayed in Ridgeview, Virginia, the same house David grew up in. It wasn't fancy, but it had history in the walls. My husband, Walter, had passed away 12 years ago. Before he died, he worked with an estate lawyer to create a family trust, one that held the house, some farmland we leased out, and a few long-term investments. It was designed to support me in retirement, and one day, if earned, to support our children and grandchildren. Walter made me the sole trustee. I asked why he didn't list David too. He looked me in the eye and said, "Because people change when money's involved, even sons, especially when they marry someone who thinks they're entitled to everything." I thought he was being paranoid. Now I know he saw something I didn't. For a while, David barely called. He used to check in every weekend. That became once a month, then once every few months, and only if it was my birthday, or he needed tax documents from the trust. Vanessa never called, never visited. When I had a scare with my blood pressure and landed in the hospital overnight, David came alone, stayed 45 minutes, then said they had dinner reservations in the city. Still, I held my tongue. I didn't want to become the kind of mother who kept score, I reminded myself. They're busy. This is a new generation. Maybe they show love differently. But when I saw how Vanessa treated the waitress at a local diner, snapping her fingers, complaining about the coffee temperature, I realized it wasn't about time or culture. It was about control, entitlement, and a total lack of grace. The moment everything shifted came on my 75th birthday. I invited them to a small dinner at home. Just some neighbors, my sister, and David's cousins. They RSVP'd late, showed up even later. Vanessa walked into my house like she was appraising it for sale. She didn't even take off her high heels on my hardwood floors. When I offered her a slice of homemade lemon pie, she waved it away and said, "Oh, Margaret, you know I don't eat gluten." Margaret. It was the first and last time she used my name, and it landed like a slap. That evening, I overheard her in the hallway whispering on the phone. "Once this house is in David's name, we'll gut the whole place. Open concept everything. Knock down the walls. Get rid of all that dark wood and those creepy family portraits." She didn't know I was around the corner. She didn't know she was talking about my life. But most importantly, she didn't know the house wasn't in David's name. None of it was. And she definitely didn't know. It never would be. The day after the birthday dinner, Vanessa posted a photo on Instagram. A smiling picture of her and David standing on her porch with the caption, "Back in Ridgeview. Can't wait to make this place our own someday. Love." She didn't tag me, didn't mention it was my birthday, didn't mention that it was still my home. I sat there holding my tea, staring at that photo, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not hurt, resolve. I opened the old cedar box my husband left me in his final days. Inside were copies of the trust documents, Walter's handwritten notes, the legal letter naming me the sole trustee, with full authority over every distribution, every decision. It had been over a decade, and I had honored the trust the way Walter intended. I used it for maintenance, repairs, and my living expenses. Not a penny more, not a favor to anyone. But now I realized, Perhaps I'd misunderstood the purpose of the power he left me. It wasn't just to sustain. It was to protect. A few months later, I fell ill, a chest infection that wouldn't go away. I needed help around the house, so I asked David if they could visit for a week or two. Maybe lend a hand, maybe even just check in. Vanessa's response? She sent me a link to a local home care agency. Maybe it's time we think about professional help, Margaret, she texted. You shouldn't have to rely on family for everything. Everything. As if I'd ever asked for more than a moment of decency. I didn't respond. Instead, I contacted a local lawyer in Ridgeview, an old friend of Walter's, and updated the terms of the trust. Not to be petty, but to be precise. I added a clause. No distributions could be made to any beneficiary married to a non-blood relative, unless approved by the trustee. In other words, me. Vanessa could live in fantasies, but legally, she'd never touch a dime. Soon after, things got even more transparent. They started visiting more often. Vanessa began asking subtle questions about the property. This old place could sell for a lot if we added some updates, you know, she said one afternoon while sipping wine on my porch. It's got potential. Once we modernize it. She always said we, but it was never ours. She even brought a real estate agent by one weekend. Unannounced. I just wanted to get a ballpark, she smiled. Nothing serious. Just dreaming. I didn't say anything. I just poured myself a cup of tea and asked the agent if he'd like a slice of pie. He looked confused. Vanessa looked annoyed. And David? He looked at his shoes. That's when I saw it. My son wasn't a bad man. He was just tired, worn down, shrunk by a marriage that had no room for anyone but Vanessa. She made all the decisions. He just signed where she pointed. And maybe that's why I didn't get angry at him anymore. I just stopped waiting for him to protect me. The turning point came that winter. I had a fall, just a slip on the porch step. And the doctor recommended I take things slow. Vanessa showed up the next week with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We've been talking, she said, and we think it might be time for you to consider assisted living. I blinked. Oh, I asked. Why now? It's just safer. You'll be with people your age. There's staff, medication reminders. David and I are worried about you out here all alone. I smiled. You're worried about me, I said, staring at her over my glasses. Her expression tightened. She wasn't expecting resistance. Then came the real reason. It's also just a little impractical to manage 2 homes, she added. If we consolidate and move here, we can keep the family home alive. Start fresh, with me packed away in a facility. Like an old coat you no longer wear, but don't have the heart to throw out. She thought I was fading. She thought I didn't have fight left in me, but I wasn't fading. I was watching and waiting. 3 days after that little conversation about assisted living, I made an appointment at Wheeler & Sons, a small law office on Main Street, where Walter used to handle all our estate matters. Mr. Wheeler had passed on, but his daughter, Claire, now ran the firm. She remembered me the moment I walked in. You're Walter Lewis's Margaret, she said, rising from behind her desk with a warm smile. He used to talk about you, like you were royalty. I smiled back. He left me with a crown I never asked for, I said, setting down the old blue folder I'd kept hidden for years. Inside were copies of the original family trust, the amendment I'd made months earlier, and Walter's letter, written by hand, stating his reason for making me the sole trustee. Claire read every word, slowly, carefully, without rushing. Then she looked up and said, "Do you want to enforce this now?" I nodded. "They're circling. She thinks she already owns the place." Claire leaned back in her chair and exhaled through her nose. "Good, because most people wait too long. You're not powerless, Margaret. In fact, you hold every card." That week, Claire helped me file a notice of protection on the house and properties within the trust. She updated the county deed records to clearly reflect that no transfer, sale, or renovation could occur without the express written consent of the trustee. That trustee was still me. She also prepared a formal letter that would be sent to David and Vanessa, making it clear that any plans regarding the family estate, occupancy, sale, development, or inheritance, would have to go through me and be approved by me. Claire gave me the draft to review before it went out. I added one line, right at the end. "Please remember, stewardship is not the same thing as entitlement." 2 weeks later, I invited them over for lunch. I made roast chicken. Vanessa said she was off meat that week and only nibbled at the salad. David ate quietly. He always did, lately. When we were done, I slid the envelope across the table. She looked at it like it was a parking ticket. "What's this?" she asked. "Just an update," I said gently. "About the house, the trust, the future." She opened it, read the first few lines, then stopped. "You had this done without consulting us?" she asked, voice rising slightly. "I didn't need to consult you," I said, folding my napkin. "It's not your name on anything. It's not even David's." Vanessa's jaw clenched. "But he's your son." "He is," I said, "and that's why I've been more than patient." David said nothing. His face was pale. She turned to him. "Are you okay with this?" He looked at me, then at her, and said nothing. That silence said everything. A few days later, I got a call from the bank. A senior manager at Ridgeview Mutual told me that someone had come in asking about the family trust account, trying to get access to prepare for future expenses. "It was your daughter-in-law," he said, lowering his voice. "She brought some documents, nothing official. Said she was acting in your interest," softly. "Did she say I asked her to?" She implied it. "Well," I said, "that's a problem. Because I didn't." He paused. "We didn't release anything. But I thought you should know." The next time Vanessa called, her tone had changed. "I just feel like we've had some misunderstandings lately," she began sweetly. "No misunderstandings," I said. I was very clear. There was a pause. Then came the real reason for her call. "If anything ever happened to you," she said, "I just want to make sure we're aligned, that David and I are prepared to carry the family's legacy." I smiled. "Vanessa," I said calmly, "if anything ever happens to me, the next trustee is already appointed." "You mean David?" "No," I said, "not David." Another pause. I could hear her breathing through the phone. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," I replied. "You just have to accept it." Later that night, I sat on the porch, alone, tea in hand, the winter air settling into my bones. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own home. I felt like a steward again, a woman with quiet power, the kind Walter had trusted, the kind Vanessa had underestimated. Let her pace, let her question, let her plan renovations in her head. She may have married my son, but she'd never inherit my name, my house, or my silence. Winter passed into spring, and with it came a silence from Vanessa. No visits, no check-ins, no snide remarks veiled in sweetness. I figured she was biding her time, waiting for what she assumed was inevitable, that I'd fade, falter, or simply pass. But I didn't. I got stronger. I started going on short walks again, baked bread on Sundays, hosted my sister overnight for the first time in months. My life, small as it looked from the outside, was mine, fully. Then one afternoon, Claire, my lawyer, called. She tried again, she said. I didn't even need to ask who. Vanessa had gone to Ridgeview Mutual a second time, this time bringing a typed letter, supposedly signed by David, requesting early access to the trust's property account for upcoming renovation work. She spoke to the manager, like the funds were already hers, told them she'd be making decisions soon, and even asked if they'd like to be involved in refinancing options. Cut. This time, the bank was ready. The manager politely asked for identification, trustee documentation, and a notarized statement from me. When she couldn't provide it, he leaned forward and said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lewis, but you're not on the trust, and unless your name appears on the authorization file, we can't legally discuss these accounts with you. Not today, not ever." According to the teller who saw it happen, she stood frozen for a moment, blinking, as if the words didn't register. Then she gathered her papers and left without saying a word. 2 days later, David called. "I just wanted to check on you," he said. I could hear the unease in his voice. He was walking on eggshells, as usual. I told him I was well, stronger, clearer than ever. He didn't bring up the trust, or Vanessa, or the bank. But before he hung up, he said something that stayed with me. "Mum," he said quietly, "I think I've lost myself somewhere, and I don't know how to come back." My heart broke, but I didn't rush to fix it. Some things a man must reckon with on his own. Months passed. The silence held. Vanessa no longer smiled in photos. The captions changed from building dreams to restructuring priorities. I stayed out of it. My power wasn't in confrontation. It was in the structure I'd protected, the boundaries Walter had taught me to draw. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's just a folded document, a forgotten clause, a name left off the signature line. Last week, I went into town to close out a small CD at the bank. The same manager who had handled Vanessa's visit greeted me at the desk. "Mrs. Lewis," he said, standing. "It's always a pleasure." He slid a paper across the desk for my signature, then hesitated before adding, "You know, I don't usually say this, but it was a privilege to see someone stand their ground with such quiet dignity." Smiled. "She thought I was weak," I said. He nodded. "A lot of people confuse kindness with weakness." I left the bank with a warmth in my chest I haven't felt in years. Not because I had won, but because I had remembered who I was. To those listening, if you ever feel erased, overlooked, or underestimated, remember this. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Age doesn't mean irrelevance. And inheritance is not a right. It's a responsibility. One I carried until the very end. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own mother, or grandmother, or maybe even yourself, we share these stories so the world doesn't forget what quiet strength looks like. Subscribe for more. There are more stories to tell. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't shout, it signs the final page.